and continue to, IT is so broad, but you have to continue to learn and stay up on things because the next day it could be outdated.
Right.
Just like that.
That's a really good point, Tanya. I think that one of the things that is automatically kind of jumping out to me with just listening to you so far is the value of being able to communicate your transferable skills. Because as you said, I guess anybody can go and get a coding certification or something like that. And of course, while we definitely want to encourage that, there is so much value. And I don't want people who are visiting our booth or who are just considering something in this field to really underestimate the value of having that boots on the ground experience and really, think critically about how you can transfer those skills that you have into another space. So many people, as you said, don't necessarily go into it thinking, okay, I want to work in tech, but they may be considering it for the first time, but they may also have built a career in something else and then are kind of working toward, okay, I want to do something else now. How can I use these skills in a different way? And that's one thing that I love about your story the most, how it highlights the way that you took this one skill set and were able to apply it to a whole different career and a whole different position. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And for it to either be voluntarily or non-voluntarily, right?
Right.
You and I have talked on a couple occasions, and we talked about even now, and I'll give you a chance to kind of share with us, how you kind of transitioned into where you are now. But I think that one thing is that we can't predict what is happening. And, one thing that I'll say, and I keep throwing this, because we are in National Apprenticeship Week, that because of the program being 18 and up, there's no cap, right? So that means that, and some of the things that you and I talked about, where there are a lot of people out there above 18 that have had experience in the workforce that are shifting priorities, shifting careers, shifting where they stand in their position, maybe locations, maybe they're relocating, all these different reasons for, looking at other opportunities and looking at other fields. And you kind of, whether it was on purpose or not, are now looking into opportunities in other fields because, life happens.
It does. I'll give you another example. So I did a little research on the whole user experience, user research design. And there are a lot, when it comes to user experience research, I'm finding anthropology and teachers are taking those skills and transferring them over into user experience research. Anthropology, obviously, because there's a lot of research involved. So you have that skill set already. But teachers are kind of sliding into like instructional systems design. I think that's fascinating because
absolutely.
Whereas some may be good at that and some might be better in the classroom, but both are needed.
Yep.
And I think it's a space, it's room for everyone now. There's something for everyone. And it's very difficult to figure out what it is, where your niche is. So it's very beneficial to sort of move around if you can, it's interesting because nowadays people aren't staying at jobs very long.
That's right.
The one that it sounds funny, but the negative thing about my resume is that I was someplace for 17 years.
Imagine that.
Right. And we were growing up, it was like, oh, you got to stay.
If you were there for a few months or only a year at a time, something was wrong, right? So that's a great point. Different time.
So, and we learn now that on average, most people will stay in a position for no more than 2 years. And if they stay for longer than 2 years, there's an expectation that either there is some sort of forward progression within the company itself, or employers want to know, well, what are you doing to develop yourself? What are you doing to continue to grow? There's a lot of emphasis from an employer perspective to continue to challenge yourself, to continue to develop skills and develop yourself professionally. We have definitely moved away from the time where, you know, you just get a job and you stay there for 30 years and then you retire and you get your pension, and that's not the way that the world works anymore. And, which is definitely a good thing in a lot of ways, but I think can also be, you know, kind of overwhelming sometimes to job seekers, especially if they're a little bit more seasoned and are used to the old way of doing things.
And that's actually a perfect segue into kind of the next part of the discussion. And you know, we talk about how, you know, starting out, we talk about, you know, the fact that you were, you know, 17 years in the healthcare field and transitioning into health IT and all that, and you know how technology has changed from, you know, like you were saying, you know, even with what you created and what you were developing at that time was incredibly innovative at that time.
Probably
right?
So outdated right now.
And now, yeah, now it's like, oh, we've been doing that. What is, you know, what are you talking about? But you know, with that being the case and staying up with the time and staying going forward, and then what you were mentioning about the whole user experience research, I think that's incredibly, and I'm thinking, you know, I'm putting a note in my hat about, you know, can we create apprenticeship programs with that? But I am also thinking about it. Yeah, and I'm also thinking about it in the context that that, you know, over the time, and we're talking about all this, you know, this happening over this period of time, you know, and you and I have talked a little bit about this, but you know, diversity being such an important issue nowadays, and I digress on that because it's been an important issue since the beginning of time, but you know, more recently it's really taken and kind of gotten you know, more traction, and it's gotten a foothold on kind of industries across the board, and people are really paying attention to it. I think so. I'm interested, excuse me, in, you know, kind of your experience diversity wise, being a Black woman in healthcare, in tech. You know, what has been your experience there, and how have you seen things maybe change, or for the better, maybe change for the worse, depending on, you know, your perspective?
I was 99% of the time the only Black woman in the room.
Yeah.
Rarely, you know, it can be difficult, but you have to change your mindset, right? You have to kind of dig a little deep, go inside, figure out what your strengths are. I think we talked about before how it's important to make connections too in this industry. Because when you need to get something done, you need to be able to pick up the phone and call someone and they respond to you, right? Because that's extremely important. But I personally developed relationships and made sure that people knew what I was doing, what projects I was working on. So if something came up, my name's in the room. Hey, Tanya did this before. Let's check her. Let's ask her, you know, what we can do or how, anything, you know. But it's still a very lonely feeling at times. You know, you're with a lot of males, you know, so that's a whole nother language too as well. But I think where my value came in most was my ability to speak to the layperson and explain the systems or what's happening, because what you have sometimes is, you know, a lot of tech people just expect everybody to understand what they mean or what they're saying, or, you know, well, what do you mean? Just do this, you know.
Right.
So, you know, and if you've had no exposure to that, and you have nurses who have been working for 30, 40 years, and now they have to learn a whole new system. And, you know, they're used to writing in a chart. Now you're typing in a chart, which is time consuming. And there's less time for patients nowadays. So, you know, they're trying to find that balance. And there is a quote that I love. It was a report by the Society of Human Resource Management. And I think this sort of sums up inclusion. and differences to me. So it said when employees who are different from one another are heard and enabled to flourish, a company will benefit more from their ideas and skills. So a diverse workplace whereby inclusion is at its core means there's more access to different points of views, skill sets, creative vision, approaches, and experience, which is more likely to result in a tech company producing more innovative products and services for users and clients. I think they said that beautifully, and it's true. And I think they have a social responsibility as well to include everyone, globally as well, because everyone has access.
That's right.
It's no longer just America or just France or like UK or just so it's crucial. If you love what you do, it'll come out as well, and if you're good at what you do, that'll show. But I cannot stress enough, relationships. It is so key that you still at the same time find ways to still be true to yourself, because I know you can lose yourself a little bit, especially when you're not heard or you feel you have to dumb it down or and then listen, the minute I walk in the door, they're not sure whether I'm that eye rolling loud black woman, so here I am in all these spaces where I have to prove myself before I'm accepted. And it's unfortunate. I hate the saying play the game, but you gotta play the game.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're dead on, and I think that's great insight on how to navigate through challenging diversity issues and diversity challenged situations. I think that we are, in a space where we really need to capitalize on the movement now, and those of us who are in positions to say something should, and I think that what you said a little bit earlier about being strategic and tactical and it being about relationships is really key to moving that ball forward. So I appreciate that piece. Coming back to and wrapping back around, because we're close to the end of this discussion, but wrapping back around to the National Apprenticeship Week and apprenticeship programs and the efforts that Vanguard is working on. We want to make sure that we are providing that kind of inclusion in apprenticeships. If you look at apprenticeships or the face of apprenticeships, we already talked about the type of trades that were historically in apprenticeships, but we haven't really talked much about how diverse apprenticeship programs have been in the past, and they have not been very diverse. And so part of our efforts here with this project and with our partners, Net America, HSG, and ICF, are to ensure that these programs and the opportunities with these programs are inclusive of all underrepresented populations and demographics, as to a point that we are seeking to partner with and develop relationships with and create programming around those, whether it be HBCUs, whether it be minority serving organizations, whether it be other workforce development parties and people and organizations. And so this is great. This is super important. Your insight is incredibly valuable, and thank you and thank Keo for joining us in this discussion today.